Egypt, one of the most powerful and influential civilizations that humanity has ever had to offer. Over 5,000 years of unrefuted identity with Afro-Asiatic roots, which brings us to today's story. If you've ever walked through Cairo, Alexandria, or even Giza, you would hear Arabic, specifically Masri, in the markets, in the stores, and in the streets themselves. Of course, Arabic is not the indigenous language of Egypt. There is a unique, homegrown Egyptian language, a direct descendant of the speech of great pharaohs, such as Ramses, Amenhotep, and Tutankhamun. The descendant of this Egyptian language is dormant, yet its heart still beats, as you can hear its bellows from Christian churches and cathedrals from across Egypt. That language is Coptic. And cinematic opening over. My name is Jasper, and this is Jasper Loves Language, a channel I started as a passion project for me to make video essays based on topics that interest me, which are overwhelmingly language related. But before we talk about Coptic, we have to understand where Coptic came from, the original ancient Egyptian language. The language of the ancient Egyptians that you're thinking of is an extinct Afro-Asiatic language, simply referred to as Egyptian. Written mainly in the hieroglyphic script, it was spoken in the Old Kingdom of Egypt from around 3300 BCE to 2000 BCE. Later pharaohs of the Old Kingdom standardized hieroglyphic writing, so everyone can kind of understand what the hell everybody else was talking about. Middle Egyptian came after, and was highly documented. Still using hieroglyphics, though much more standardized in the previous era, it's the earliest version of the Egyptian language that we can decipher with reasonable accuracy. Writing complex ideas with little pictures does become extremely difficult after a while. So up until around 1300 BCE, you could hear Middle Egyptian. Its phonology is very hotly debated, and it underwent several revisions both during and after its spoken period. Late Egyptian came last, and a period of diglossia began to form in the New Kingdom of Egypt that continued up until the Coptic period, but especially in its first few centuries. Diglossia is a fancy word for two official languages spoken at the same time. Very often there is a literary, high-class language for the educated, and a colloquial, low-class or vulgar language that all the crackheads standing on the street corner at 4 a.m. speak along with everyone else. Late Egyptian is the latter, and diverged very slowly from Middle Egyptian, only gradually drifting from this literary language over a period of centuries. After this point comes the fourth stage, Demotic, coming from the Greek word demotikos, meaning popular. This is obviously a reference to the fact that this was the popular speech in Egypt at the time, mainly between the 7th century BCE to around the 3rd century CE. This language was very similar to Late Egyptian, but its main difference was a change in writing system, namely the Demotic script that gives the language its name. Demotic also has their own early, middle, and late stage period that I won't really go crazy into, mainly because it's genuinely easier to catch an ostrich in Alexandria than explain ancient Egyptian linguistics accurately. I wouldn't do it justice, though I may make a future video on Demotic if I feel like it and find the time. Regardless, it's important to address the elephant in the room, or more specifically, the Macedonian general hurtling towards Egypt at Mach fuck with an army that is yet to lose a battle and okay, Egypt is gone. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE and was widely welcomed as a liberator, because the only thing that the Egyptian people hated more than the Nile flooding, plagues, and forced to build batshit insane architecture in the sun that people are convinced that aliens must have built is Persia. Regardless, Alexander founded a certain city, Alexandria, and more importantly, after he died, one of his generals and closest buddies, Ptolemy, became pharaoh of Egypt. The thing about Ptolemy is the Egyptian people really started to love Ptolemy and his later dynasty. Despite being of Greek descent, the Ptolemies had a deep admiration and reverence for Egyptian culture, learning the language, worshipping their gods, and just participating in their culture in general. This caused a great cultural and linguistic exchange between both Egypt and Greece. So as a result, a Hellenization or Greekification period of Egypt began to occur. And you can see this heavily during the Middle and Late Demotic periods, as Koine Greek becomes a language of administration throughout Egypt. By the time of Roman rule, however, we finally get to the topic of this video, Coptic. Coptic is the final stage of the Egyptian language, generally dated to have been spoken after the conquering of Egypt by Rome to the present day. Coptic, coming directly from the Greek word for the country, Aegyptos, which then was borrowed into Arabic as Qubd, which was then borrowed into French as Copt, which was then borrowed into English as Copt. Coptic is obviously highly influenced by Greek. In fact, the Coptic script used then and still in use today uses the Greek alphabet. However, this Greek alphabet has an added 7 letters, with their visuals derived from the previous Demotic script to represent unique Egyptian sounds that did not appear in Greek, such as sha, cha, or ha. Coptic, in the Coptic language, is spelled like this, pronounced Timetri Manchemi. Coptic doesn't really have a standardized variety, though Bohairic, the dialect officially used by the Coptic Orthodox and Coptic Catholic churches native to Lower Egypt, which of course is the upper half of the country because we are not consistent, becomes the de facto standard around 11th century CE. Other dialects that exist and are still notable are Sahidic, Fayumic, South Fayumic, Eshmenunic, Oxyrhynchite, the coolest sounding name for a language ever, by the way, Lycopolitan, Akhmimic, and Aswanic. Bohairic is really the only dialect that has actual speakers in the modern day because, as aforementioned, it is the main liturgical language of the Coptic Orthodox and the Coptic Catholic churches in Egypt. Probably not. At least, not in place of Egyptian Arabic. As long as the Caliphate crosses the Sinai Desert and conquers Egypt, Coptic is unfortunately doomed to be supplanted. Well, what about Farsi, the indigenous language of Iran? Iran was conquered by the Caliphates, and still, Farsi is spoken today. Yes, this is a point. Farsi did survive the Arab conquest of the 7th century, but it's important to note that the geography of both Iran and Egypt are vastly different. The Arabs' horse-led armies were much better at traversing the flat deserts of Egypt rather than the rugged, mountainous terrain of Iran, which allowed Farsi to survive in small pockets long after the conquest ended. Farsi also became highly influenced by Arabic, such as Farsi after the Arab conquest being written in a modified Arabic script, similar to how aforementioned Coptic is written in a modified Greek script, with many Arabic loanwords in Farsi today. Basically, as long as the Muslims conquer Egypt, Coptic will be supplanted by Arabic. Though, it's time we get to the important question that we want to address, and I'm sure that a lot of you are thinking. What did Coptic sound like? Thankfully, you can still hear Coptic today. Like I said in the intro, you can hear it in Coptic churches all across Egypt and the world, though I don't think there's many large notable Coptic communities outside of Egypt, maybe the United States. It's used as the liturgical language, similar to how Jews use Hebrew and how Roman Catholics use Latin. As a result, there isn't really many examples of spoken Coptic in the modern day, as the language was supplanted by Arabic after the conquest and was gradually replaced by Arabic until the last records of native Coptic speakers in Upper Egypt, which is the other side of the country to Lower Egypt, or the lower half of the country because we are not consistent, and yes, that geographical term follows the flow of the Nile River, died out around the 1500s during Mamluk and Ottoman rule. But I've prepared a few Coptic samples that I will attempt to replicate to the best of my ability. If somehow some Coptic clergy or insanely dedicated Coptic revivalist comes across this video, I'd love to hear how my pronunciation is. Sentence 1. Nofri, anok webul hen chemi. Hello, I'm from Egypt. Literally speaking, Nofri, hello, Anok, I am, notice the similarities to Arabic's ena and Hebrew's ani, with that common Afro-Asiatic root word for I am, webulhen, literally meaning by way of, or in this context, from, and chmi, meaning Egypt. You've probably heard its English equivalent kemet, or maybe even its adjective kemetic when referring to something Egyptian. Sentence 2. Tishopen Alexandrias. I live in Alexandria. Literally speaking, Tishopen, I live in, and Alexandrias, as Alexandria. I should note that this city actually kept its name even in modern Egyptian Arabic, being Alexandria. Sentence 3. Ayuwash sheshop baitvet. I would like this fish. Literally speaking, Ayuwash, I would like, eshop baitvet, this fish. Now, I won't include the grammatical breakdown of this next part, but here is my attempt to read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the Bohairic dialect of Coptic. Here we go. Efuai semisi remho nemid sho sheaxia nem dikayusune. En tho se erehmot gnome nem sunedesis uo empen thruarchete metromi hina en tho emefreti enesneo. Before I end this section, special thanks to CopticTranslator.com specifically for their Bohairic translator, as they, along with many other organizations, are determined to keep the Coptic language alive, and their work shouldn't go underappreciated. Obviously, as we've discussed, Coptic isn't really spoken anymore. However, it acted as a substrate language for Egyptian Arabic. As we've lightly touched upon, the Egyptian language, through Coptic, shares a lot with Arabic, mainly in its grammatical syntax, which definitely assisted in the gradual replacement of Coptic with Arabic in Egypt after the Arab conquests. But what if I were to tell you that Coptic did survive to everyday speech in Egypt, just under a thin shell of Arabization? According to a 1843 to 1849 paper by Dr. Wilson B. Bishai, there is a substantial amount of evidence that the Egyptian variety of Arabic retains similar grammatical patterns to Coptic, mainly the delay of the interrogative pronoun, which is a uniquely Egyptian Arabic feature. Basically, what this means for somebody not obsessed with a language and its rules is that a question word, such as who, whom, what, which, whose, how, etc., comes much later in a sentence than they would normally, or comparatively, in this case, Egyptian Arabic versus other dialects. Several vocabulary words in Egyptian Arabic have also been attributed to origins in Coptic as well, with some of these words eventually ending up in Spanish, Portuguese, or Catalan as a result of future Arab conquest, or in English as a result of global trade. For example, the Egyptian Arabic word for Nile crocodile, timsah, comes from the Coptic word emsa and piemsa. The Arabic word for brick, tulba, in Bohairic Coptic, tubi, and in Sahidic Coptic, tube. This entered both Catalan and Spanish through Andalusi Arabic after the Umayyad conquest of Iberia, as tova in Catalan and adobe in Spanish, which the latter entered English as adobe. The word for oasis in Egyptian Arabic, wahha, in Bohairic Coptic, wehi, and in Sahidic Coptic, wahe. This evolved from the ancient Egyptian / Middle Egyptian word, and I'm going to pronounce this to the best of my ability, wahit, meaning resting place, referring to those pools of water with the palm tree stock images you usually think about when you hear the word oasis. This was also borrowed into Ottoman Turkish as vaha, and into modern Turkish as the same word. There was also a substantial amount of Coptic loanwords that entered Greek and eventually English, though the current number is unknown. For example, the word barge in English, referring to a small boat, ultimately comes from Coptic's bare. After this video, you can see that Coptic, despite not filling the streets of Cairo, Alexandria, or Giza anymore, is still very much alive as a reminder of what Egypt's indigenous language used to be. Coptic isn't gone yet either, as its echoes still move throughout Egypt and the world beyond. If you'd like to support the Coptic community in Egypt, or even just learn a bit more about the Coptic language, I have book recommendations and organization links in the description for further education on this topic. This was Jasper Loves Languages, and good night.